Today we're taking a look at some trade rumors involving players like Sam Reinhart and Brent Burns of the San Jose Sharks. We're looking at an update on contract status for head coach Brindamour of the Carolina Hurricanes and John Tortorella of the Columbus Blue Jackets. We also have some signings to discuss, and could the Boston Bruins possibly re-sign David Krejci and Taylor Hall both ahead of the expansion draft? We'll discuss those possibilities coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to talk about here today. Let's kick things off first with a few NHL signings. We actually have 3 different prospect goalies have signed NHL entry-level deals. First up, we have the Lightning have signed Swedish prospect goaltender Hugo Alnefelt, who's played in Sweden for HV71. He's a 2019 third-round selection. He's currently 19 years old, and he's a 6'3" goaltender from Sweden, as I mentioned. So certainly an interesting prospect for the Lightning. And we have the Carolina Hurricanes have actually signed a pair of prospect goaltenders. First up, the Canes signed goaltender Eetu Makiniemi, who's a Finnish goaltender. 4th round pick from 2017 and been playing in Liga for the past few years. Currently 22 years of age. And they've also signed a Russian prospect goaltender, Peter Kochakov, a 21-year-old goalie from the KHL who was a 2nd round pick back in 2019. So those are your prospect signings. Then we also have another signing, for actually it's a KHL signing technically, but a player that was heavily rumored to be going back to the NHL, and that's defenseman Nikita Tryamkin, who was many expected here at least to be re-signing likely with the Vancouver Canucks. Of course, he played with the Canucks a few years back and has been back in the KHL. Didn't have the greatest start to his NHL career, but based on what we've seen for highlights and how he's played in the KHL, looks as though he has and certainly improved and matured a lot as a defenseman. They had contract negotiations last offseason. However, things kind of stalled, didn't get too far. He ended up going back to the KHL on another 1-year deal, and his agent has had renewed negotiations with the Vancouver Canucks here, but things didn't really work out at all, and he said this year he's not waiting around all offseason just to find out that maybe there's a lot of deals he could have had and didn't end up taking. So they discussed a 1- and 2-year deal with the Canucks, advised what it would take to get him interested to sign, and the Canucks apparently were nowhere near the dollar value that they were looking for. Now, I don't know what the dollar values were, but the Canucks were rumored to be quite a ways off. So rather than go back and forth here and extend this well into the offseason, he had an opportunity to get another 2-year contract in the KHL for pretty decent money. So they commented to the fact that they didn't want to wait around and miss out. So he's taking that 2-year contract and staying in the KHL. Now, of course, last year we saw the Vancouver Canucks end up with an interesting offseason, I guess we could say. They lost a lot of players through free agency, and a lot of which was kind of due to the fact that there was, at least appeared to be, from what we're hearing, not the greatest communication. Like they lost Chris Tanev, they lost Tyler Toffoli, Jacob Markstrom. Obviously there was others as well. Markstrom likely would have left anyhow. But a lot of this was tied to the fact that they were really heavy in trade talks with Arizona trying to get Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and I think that really took away the focus here from a lot of the free agents. They kind of all had to wait, is kind of what they were told. They kept some dialogue, but never really got too far, and I think a lot of it was always going to depend if they had this big contract coming in from Arizona. That would have impacted what they were able to spend, and they kind of left them hanging, and they had other deals they had to take, so they up and took them, which is their right. So clearly you can see a little bit of frustration here from Tryamkin and his agent that was possibly going to happen again this year, and they didn't want that to happen. So he stays in the KHL, but he's a big defenseman that was rumored to be coming back to Vancouver, which probably could have been a help actually, but we'll see. I'm not sure what his NHL future holds at this point now that he's staying over there for a couple more seasons. Quick updates on some coaching contracts. It sounds like John Tortorella appears to be done in Columbus. It looks as though his contract is expiring, and many believe here that he and the Jackets are going to basically mutually agree to part ways, and we'll probably get an announcement shortly after the Jacket season is over, indicating that he's not going to be re-signed and that they both feel it's best for each party to go in a different direction. And a lot of that kind of comes from comments recently from Aaron Portzline, who covers the Jackets for The Athletic. And it seems to be what we're seeing here. I think it's fair to say that I would agree with that sentiment, that it's time. But obviously Tortorella will go down as one of the better Jackets coaches that they've had. Certainly a unique kind of coach that some players might find difficult to play for, but at the same time very well respected, very successful throughout his career. Obviously, I've seen comments as well that came from other executives within the Jackets organization, and they kind of alluded to the fact that they felt Tortorella would go down as one of the greatest coaches ever to coach the team. So it kind of sounded like all the answers to looking around there was more in past tense. So that's why many feel that it's pretty much a given that he leaves. Now, they don't really get the sense either that his coaching career is over, that he wants to continue coaching. So I'm sure he'll look for work with some of the vacancies. Would he be a contender in the new Seattle franchise? It's a possibility. Could he go to a team like Buffalo? I mean, Don Granato's done a good job there on an interim basis, but you have to wonder what direction they're going to go in. He's proven with a team like Columbus, and even before that with his runs in the Rangers and even in Tampa, that he can take a team that's needs to be built up and have a lot of success. So either way, Tortorella likely continues coaching, but he'll be likely looking for opportunities elsewhere when the season's over. Now, the other big update comes on Canes head coach Rod Brindamour. Now, it was reported on Saturday headlines from Elliot Friedman that one of the big sticking points here for the Brindamour contract extension is not just about himself, but he wants the rest of his staff looked after as well. Obviously, we know that the Canes are a lower paying team when it comes to their other roles besides the players, when it comes to management, coaches, etc. And he wants to make sure that not only himself but his assistant coaches and even like the equipment staff, the training staff, he wants all of them to be looked after as well, because many of them are also on expiring deals. So the Carolina Hurricanes have a lot of people there that don't know what their future holds, and Rod Brindamour wants to bring some stability to the franchise, but not just himself, but obviously the Canes are having a terrific year. He has every right to be, not too demanding, but still, he certainly deserves a raise, and I think he's earned a right to have more of a voice in what they do here. And clearly, there's still many that expect the deal will get done, that Brindamour will remain the coach of the Hurricanes. But if he doesn't get things worked out and things go sideways and he becomes a free agent head coach, there's going to be a lot of people lining up to speak to him, including Seattle and others, because he's done an absolutely terrific job. Even though he really didn't have a ton of coaching experience when he first took that job on, he's done a great job and has proven that he's right in his element there and has turned out to be one of the better coaches in the league. I would think he'll likely be in the running for the Jack Adams Trophy this year. At least that would be my opinion, but we'll see. But we'll obviously having him put pressure on the organization and look after the entire staff is probably a good thing all in all, and hopefully everything gets worked out and he can remain in Carolina. Now, as I mentioned, I want to take a look at a couple of NHL trade rumors involving a couple of fairly big names here in Sam Reinhart and Brent Burns. We'll get to the Bruins stuff here in a moment as well. Now, Sam Reinhart has had more of an opportunity to play his natural position of center as of late, given the Jack Eichel injury. We've seen Dylan Cousins be out for a little while as well, and there's been more of a need for center iceman in Buffalo. So Reinhart, being a natural center for the most part leading up to his career in Buffalo, has had a chance to play, and he's done relatively well. He's been putting up good points. He was already having a good season even when he was playing on the wing as well. He's been a pretty consistent performer for them really the last number of years, and he is a pending restricted free agent, so he's needing a new deal. And be given the fact that he's been able to play center and prove that he could continue to do that and do it well, many wonder what that means for his next contract. Will that possibly lead to a Sam Reinhart trade? Because they need a lot of different pieces there in Buffalo to help things out. There's certainly question marks on other guys like Eichel and others too. It's really hard to say what direction Kevin Adams and the Sabres are going to go in this offseason, but there's still a lot of possibilities that we could see, and Reinhart's another one of those guys. He's earned himself a good contract, and I can't help but wonder if they're going to be a little hesitant to be giving out big contracts, given how some of them have gone lately. Like the Jeff Skinner contract's backfired on them. I mean, the Eichel contract, you can't really say it's backfired, but I mean, he was out all season injured. There is certain risk associated with paying these players that kind of money and giving them that kind of term. So a guy like Reinhart, who's really close to being an unrestricted free agent, you have to be careful here. He's been a good player for you. He's been consistent, but he continues to drive his value up. And if they don't want to end up spending that kind of money on a player, even though he's important to them, given where they're at with their total franchise, and if they look and say, okay, well, if we're not really going to be the most competitive for a few years and we need to bring in all these different pieces to really build this thing back up here, it doesn't make more sense to trade Sam Reinhart. I mean, you have to wonder, because he could get a nice return for them. He's been a real solid, productive guy. Turned out to be a versatile forward now who can play center and wing. He's been able to score. He's good on the productive side, like when it comes to setting up plays as well. Like, he's an all-around pretty decent hockey player on the offensive side of the game. So clearly, he's a guy that would attract a fair bit of interest. I know that it was rumored before that the Sabres got calls on him as well as Eichel, so we'll see. No guarantee here that he gets moved. It's just been interesting to see him be able to go back to his natural position, possibly drive up his value here even more, and just knowing the history, what we've seen in Buffalo lately, it's just making some people think that maybe he won't get re-signed after all, and they could see what kind of a big haul they could bring back after trading him instead. So we'll see what the future holds for him in Buffalo. And Brent Burns, there's another article here talking about the possibility of the San Jose Sharks trying to move Burns to the Seattle Kraken and what it would take to offer as a sweetener. I mean, the article I came across was wondering about if they offer the Kraken their first-round pick, would they be able to take the Burns contract? I mean, it's got a fair bit of term, a fairly high AAV. I mean, I can see the Kraken maybe taking one or two players that might have a bigger salary, but, you know, obviously they're going to want some incentive to do so. The Sharks are a team that's not very deep on prospects. They don't have a ton of high picks. Like, you know, they're going to have a good first-round pick this year, but if they trade it, you know, that's going to hurt a little bit. So I really don't know about the Sharks in doing this. I mean, clearly getting Burns off the books would be helpful in a sense because they could take that money and go after some other players. They could use their first round pick if they could keep it, but it's not going to be easy to do. I mean, you gotta have to really wonder what is the right thing here. Now, if they left Burns exposed in the expansion draft, would Seattle take him on their own? I would have to say I think they might, but I'm going to say that they probably would pressure San Jose into giving them something extra to make it happen. That's my guess. I mean, I don't know. It's a lot of money and a lot of term on a player who's, you know, not so young anymore, but he's still an interesting guy to have around. He's a guy who can certainly, you know, be entertaining for the fans as well. But from San Jose's perspective, where they have three big contracts in the blue line, it probably would be very helpful and give them much needed flexibility if they could move one of them. The Burns contract's probably the most movable out of the three, even though it's not the easiest either. And is a first-round pick too much? Is it worth it? Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments. Now, there's also recent reports indicating that the Boston Bruins are extremely happy right now with the pickup of Taylor Hall, and it looks as though that David Krejci is also a member of the Bruins that's very happy about this as well. He's been playing some of his better hockey as of late, and maybe they finally found the winger that he's so desperately been needing here for the last number of years. I mean, they're getting playoff David Krejci during a regular season, which is something they haven't seen often enough in the past few years. And obviously, both guys are pending UFAs. Now, we know for the Bruins, one of their major issues for a while on a consistent basis, at least, is secondary scoring. Well, right now, they're getting more of that. And guys like Hall and Krejci are a fairly big part of it. They seem to have found some pretty decent chemistry. Like I said, Krejci's playing some of his better hockey we've seen lately. And I think they certainly stand a much better chance to have playoff success with the changes that they've made here. Now, Hall's not the only addition they've made that's fitting in well. Lazar's fitting in well. Mike Riley's fitting in well. And even though they might not have seemed like huge moves at the time besides Hall, you know, like they're subtle moves that have paid off relatively well here for the Boston Bruins. The big question around this, though, is what's it going to cost to keep both players? Clearly, Taylor Hall is coming off an $8 million contract where he didn't really play the greatest for most of the year. So you have to think his value is coming down. David Krejci is coming off a contract valued over $7 million. Clearly, he's not going to be demanding that kind of money. I don't know what it's going to take to pay both of these guys to keep them in Boston, but the Bruins seem quite interested in possibly even doing these extensions ahead of the NHL expansion draft and putting them both on a protected list just to make sure that it's done with and that they stay Boston Bruins for an extended period of time. Now, of course, if they do that, it's going to create some other potential issues here. I mean, what else could they end up having exposed through the expansion draft? From the forward side of it, if they protect 7 skaters in the forward position, you know, Bergeron, Pasternak, and Marchand are going to be in there. You throw in Taylor Hall and David Krejci, now we're up to 5. You've got Nick Ritchie, you've got Charlie Coyle, you've got Jake DeBrusk, you've got Trent Frederick, you got, you know, some others in there too, Corelli. Like, who do you protect? Who do you leave open? There's certainly some question marks there. There certainly could be an interesting player that could be made available. Now, also, the one possibility could be as well, is that maybe a guy like Jake DeBrusk does finally end up getting traded, and having his contract off the books also reduces what they can expose in the expansion draft, and it also gives them a little bit of flexibility to sign Hall and Krejci. Now, I know Jake DeBrusk is a much younger player out of the three, but he's been struggling with consistency, and it's been like over a year now that my thought has been he just needs to move on and get a fresh start, and I think maybe he could become a better player, and the Bruins could be better off with a different kind of player. This doesn't seem to jive there on a consistent basis. Now, of course, the playoffs coming up are going to dictate a lot about what they do. If Krejci and Hall continue to have chemistry, they both play well, that's just going to increase the likelihood of this happening. And if Jake DeBrusk can find another gear and be a more consistent scorer for them, well, maybe that changes things as well. But if he continues to be in and out of the lineup, not playing the best, not capitalizing on opportunities, it's also going to create more of a chance that he gets moved this offseason as well. So it wouldn't be shocking, though, if we see contract extensions offered for David Krejci and Taylor Hall before the expansion draft, and they likely end up moving Jake DeBrusk in order to kind of help create some room to make all that happen. I'd love to know what your thoughts are, especially if you're a Bruins fan. I'd love to know your thoughts on that possibly happening. So let me know your thoughts down below, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.